in your banks. We've told you you are too big to fail. You don't have to worry about losses anymore. Taxpayers got your back. Welcome to the world of nationalized banking, when the government gets to pick and choose winners and losers. Now, I said it was $6.9 billion, the banks held 6.6. Bankruptcy courts are not just courts of law, they are courts of equity. In other words, it's kind of majority rules. Well, 6.6 being the vast majority of 6.9 meant because they accepted 29 cents, everybody else, including Indiana, was going to have to accept it too. And I said no. There were a number of private equity fund managers who filed cases to try to stop the bankruptcy, and word came out from the White House. And the word was that anyone who tried to stop the Chrysler bankruptcy would feel the full weight and measure of the White House media office. Within 3 days of those private equity managers filing their suits, they had received so many threats, as reported in the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, and the electronic media. They had received so many threats that all of those private equity fund managers went back to the Bankruptcy Court of New York, withdrew their lawsuits, and asked that the documents be permanently sealed to protect their individual identities. This is the United States of America, friends.
Oh my goodness.
Now, when that happened, that day I had a meeting with Governor Daniels, and we said, we couldn't believe this was happening. And we said, ultimately, there's got to be some class action suit on behalf of the pension funds. There would be other states involved, and as a result, we'd be an anonymous member of that class, and that, frankly, would have been perfectly fine with me. The next day, the list of pension funds came out, and there were other states. To my surprise, though, there were only two. One was California. That very day, Arnold Schwarzenegger was trying to get his own $50 billion bailout, so I was pretty sure he wasn't going to fight the federal government. And the other state, irony of ironies perhaps, was Michigan, home of Chrysler, and they weren't going to fight it. I will tell you, I will never forget, as long as I live, looking at my computer screen and thinking, oh my God, there are 305 million Americans. Why do I have to do this? But we did it. We filed our lawsuit. We filed that lawsuit to try to stop the Chrysler bankruptcy. We were the last one standing, and at that point, the President of the United States, walked to a microphone and said anyone who would try to stop the Chrysler bankruptcy was a greedy speculator, an unpatriotic American, someone unwilling to sacrifice for the good of community. You see, sacrifice is no longer from your own heart giving what you wish to give. It's having government take it from you to give it to somebody else. That's their definition of sacrifice. That's not sacrifice, that's thievery. I will save you all the nuances of the case, but a couple here. I get asked a lot, Mourdock, where did you get the stamina to do that? Why did you do it? I'd like to say it's just because I do believe in the Constitution, I do believe in the rule of law, but I have to tell you, it's a bit personal too. You see, when he made that comment about greedy speculators and unpatriotic Americans unwilling to sacrifice, I immediately thought of a woman I know who, though she was not a public school teacher, worked her entire career in a public school system and is today retired as on a teacher's retirement fund. And I immediately thought of a gentleman who served 28 years as a state police officer and who is today retired on that fund. Both of those people, both of them, are veterans of the United States Navy as World War II veterans, and they are my parents. To have Barack Obama refer to such people as my parents, those that just a few years ago Tom Brokaw called the greatest generation, to have him call them greedy speculators and unpatriotic Americans, you bet I wasn't going to back down. The Supreme Court stopped the sale for the grand total of 32 hours, and then they let it go forward. There was all this pressure. It was described as the most complex bankruptcy in American history, but it was going to be done in 30 days. If you've ever been involved with a bankruptcy, normally they take years, but the government said it was going to be done in 30 days. They said it had to be done in 30 days because Fiat, the Italian automaker, was going to buy Chrysler. And if it wasn't done in 30 days, they said Fiat would walk away. And I kept saying, no, they're not going to walk away. Oh, yeah, they're going to walk away. I said, no, they won't. Why did I know they wouldn't walk away? Because the asset they were receiving was valued at an absolute minimum of $459 million. That's what they were receiving as an asset. How many of you know what they paid for it? Zero! Nothing! It was given to them by the United States government. They did not invest a penny. They have never invested a penny in Fiat, in Chrysler. Well, that's why I knew they weren't going to walk away. You know what? If you tell me you're going to give me $459 million on Monday, if you don't have it Monday, I will come back on Tuesday. The day after the, quote, sale, I call it the gift, the day after, the chairman of Fiat, Sergio Marchionne, was asked, would you have really walked away if this deal wasn't done in 30 days? You know what his answer was? I don't know where that date came from. It never came from us. In other words, it came from the United States government because they knew if this thing went through anything like a normal court process, they were destined to lose, and they weren't going to let that happen. We argued in our case 3 fundamental points of law. Number one, that Article 1, Section 8 of the United States Constitution says that Congress shall make uniform bankruptcy law. Congress began that work in 1791, and guess what they said first? If you're a secured creditor, it means you're first in line. The administration, the judicial branch, the executive, they don't have the right to change that. Congress said who does it, or Congress should be the one and only one who does it. We argued that the due process rights, the Fifth Amendment to the United States Constitution says no citizen shall lose wealth or property without due process of law. Let me tell you how the government works these days. Here's an example of due process. We received in our office at 10:05 a.m. on Monday, May 18th, a certified letter from the Bankruptcy Court of New York that said if we wished to challenge the 29 cents on the dollar that we were going to receive, we had the right to do that. And for us to challenge, here's what we had to do. We had to provide evidence of all of our trade tickets as to how we bought that secured debt. We had to have depositions from all of our expert witnesses compiled. And we had to have affidavits signed from everybody who was involved in purchasing that debt and making the decision. And we had to provide a thorough and complete financial analysis of Chrysler Corporation and all of its subsidiaries. And all of that had to be on file in the bankruptcy court by 4 o'clock the next afternoon. This is what they call due process of law. You see, it's like the word sacrifice. This is how they keep redefining things. This is scary stuff.
Yes, it is.
We also argued, and you probably know I'm a Republican, and I tell you, this hurts me to say it, but the first of the law that was violated in this case was not by the Obama administration, it was by the Bush administration. The Troubled Asset Recovery Program money was intended to go to the banks, and that's the money they used to fund the auto bailouts, and it was totally wrong for them to do so. The Second Circuit Court ultimately wrote, Indiana pensioners raise interesting and vexing questions regarding the constitutional appropriateness of the Treasury Secretary's actions in giving TARP funds to the automakers. Vexing questions. They went on to say they'd really like to decide the case, but the Second Circuit said they didn't have jurisdiction to decide the case because they said we, Indiana pensioners, didn't have the right to even bring the case. We didn't even have the right to be there. And their logic for that was to say we never demonstrated that under any other form of bankruptcy, which is to say following the law, that we would have received more than 29 cents on the dollar. And why do you suppose that was? Who's been listening? Because we had from 10:05 a.m. on Monday until 4 o'clock the next day to prove the case. Picking and choosing, selective enforcement, deciding who their friends are and who their friends are not. That's where we are in 2010. That's where we are. Why do I go into meetings like this? Why am I willing to drive 580 miles in a day? It is because I am motivated, I think, by much of the same thing that motivates you. Fear for our country.
That's right.
Fear can